Welcome to the show, everyone. This is produced by Stakeholder-Centered Coaching, where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. Today's episode is another installment in the series Conversations with Coaches, where our top coaches share the behind-the-scenes unfolding of their careers. The goal of the series is to give you an intimate peek behind the curtain so that you can see the messy ingredients that go into building a successful coaching career and the rewards that come at the end of the tunnel for those who are willing to put in the effort. I'm your host, Brandon Murgard, and if you'd like to ask a question or recommend a guest, send me an email to podcast@mgscc.net. My guest today is a Richard Bandler certified Neuro-Linguistic Programming trainer and coach trainer, as well as a Marshall Goldsmith leadership and team coach. In conjunction with Henley Business School, he develops programs designed to help coaches conduct effective marketing initiatives for their coaching practice. After 30 years in buying, business development, and business strategy in companies like B&Q, Argus, and BT, he has been running his current business for 15 strong years. His strapline is that he helps people succeed in their leadership, entrepreneur, and relationship adventures. Please welcome to the show our guest, Michael Beale. Great to have you on the show, Michael.
Thank you, and really great to be here.
Thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Looking forward to what questions you ask me. And you?
Yeah. You know what, Michael? I'm feeling fortunate today. You know what?
Why?
It's been about, if my numbers are right, it's been about a half decade since we've gotten to work together.
You're right.
Yeah, and I'm excited to do it again. It was, it would have been back in about 2015 or so when we brought on Expedia as a client. In fact, it was you who brought the project in, and I was fortunate enough to get to work with you alongside on the project, although it was, an arm's distance between us. But today we get to sit down in the trenches and learn about what all went into making the man that I know today. So I have to say, I'm very excited.
Carry on.
My aim for this interview, Michael, is that the audience learns about your background and how you've packaged it together, because you do a great job building a pathway towards the career that you have today. So with that in mind, let's start back at the beginning. Your early career began with work as a merchandise controller and buyer at B&Q, where you supported the company through a massive transformation. It was something like 30 million to something like €1 billion in turnover. So tell us a little bit about the position and what it meant for you.
Okay, I think I'll say a little bit about both positions. I started off as a buyer, and there's a couple of things in that. The first one is I got through 10,000 cold calls, which I actually find quite entertaining. And the one thing I will say, I respect all the salespeople here. Selling isn't the easiest of jobs, but the one thing in that job, I actually needed people to call me. So cold calling is still a useful thing. The other thing was actually building partnerships with suppliers who could enable us to make our revenue targets, our profit targets, and not cause us too much hassle. The merchandise controller bit was a bit interesting because I got yanked out of that to do a project with IBM where we looked at putting some systems in, and I had the interesting job of doing the cost benefit analysis for a project that cost 90 million. At that time, the company only had a turnover of about 40 million. And we invested I had to put the cost benefit together, part of the proposal, and the board agreed it. We then put a project for EPOS and inventory and all that sort of stuff in. But it was really interesting because I got the job to do the cost benefit in the beginning, and then I had to demonstrate. This wasn't so easy. I had to demonstrate the benefits as we went through. And it was a fascinating learning experience. But curiously, which I think relates to what you're going to talk about later, is I was able to do it because I had my stakeholders on side. I could have never done that job. It was too fraught with danger and all sorts of things, as many large projects were. But it taught me, looking back, that if you've got your stakeholders if you're in alignment with your stakeholders and they quite like you and they're happy to work with you, you can work miracles. But if you haven't, you just can't. So it sort of brought me to that idea, because in some jobs later I totally flunked it because I didn't get on with my stakeholders, or I didn't suss out what my stakeholders wanted. So it relates to what we're talking about, that actually getting on the right side of your stakeholders is a major criteria for being successful. Because even if you're good, if people are against you, it becomes an impossible task.
That's amazing.
So that's my learning. That's one of my learnings. We were one of the first companies in the world to put a full EPOS inventory reordering system. So it was a fascinating time, and that led the foundations for the company now having a turnover of about 4 billion. That was the heart of the system that got the thing working. We sort of changed every job in the process. We didn't know what we were doing, of course, but that's not necessarily a barrier.
Of course. So you had this very rich background in industry. You now have a very rich background as a coach, and it sounds like even as early as your early career, you were already getting exposed to the need for stakeholder alignment. What else did you learn through these projects?
What else did I learn through the projects? The importance of project management, the importance of basic project management, the importance of working out what your benefits are and how the hell you're going to measure them. That sounds simple, but it's not. So it's those sorts of things. So yeah, that was about it. But the stakeholder thing, I think, is the one thing I took forward. And funnily enough, I wasn't conscious of it through a number of different roles until I started doing some of the coaching. And that's why Marshall stuff, when I came across it, the brain suddenly clicked in and said, hey, there's something here I've missed. I'd sort of gone through it, but actually doing it consciously is something that I wasn't aware of, which is why I've introduced a lot of Marshall stuff in all my coaching. As I take clients on, I give them 3 sessions, and I'll tell you the reason I give them 3 sessions later. But I give them 3 sessions, and one of the sessions I get them to do their own stakeholder analysis as a part of working out what they want to be coached on. And again, a little bit like Marshall's process in everything I do, I want to spend enough time so my clients know what they're going to get out of what we do, because one, they can work out whether they want to work with me, but more importantly, they realize the value for what they get out of what they do. So there's a lot of Marshall stuff that is applicable to all sorts of coaching. He in my view, has some very, very strong processes that we can all use and help our clients be more successful.
Would you say that this exposure to stakeholder alignment early on was the place from where your interest in leadership and coaching sprouted, or did that happen later on in your career?
I think that happened later. I think that happened later. I actually found myself in leadership positions without having a clue what to do. Now that didn't necessarily stop me, and it's almost later, many years later, I look back and I think, God, sorry about that. Some of the leaders I had were really appalling, and it's actually only now that I'm beginning to put the bits of the jigsaw together. And when I work with clients, I do say to them, I'm not telling you what I did. I mean, some of what I did really worked, but I'm not teaching people, not coaching people on what I did. I'm teaching people what I've seen from my other clients' works.
And as you put this jigsaw together, just as a thought experiment, if you'd entertain it, what percentage of that puzzle is completed? You've been doing this for 15 years as a coach. You've been experiencing it for much longer in industry. If you were to say 100% of the puzzle is where you would want to be, how much of that would you say is compiled now?
Well, I would say 50%. Basically, it's something I'll say later. There's one of my clients that was right at the beginning when I started my business, and we're friends and we talk every week, and he's a business development guy. And every year or 2 years we have a gentle moan, like two old men moaning, and we say, why have we got to keep on reinventing ourselves? Mm-hmm. And the reality is every couple of years we have to reinvent ourselves. Now, if I did a little bit more future planning, that may not have to happen. But looking at my career, because I think one of the questions may come later, is the transition to coaching. My transition into coaching was easy, but I still But had I thought about it differently, I might have done a lot more planning work. But the reality was it was easy, but I still had to reinvent myself every couple of years because things change.
Let's get some quick stats on the board for our listeners. How many years have you been formally coaching, would you say?
15. It's 15 plus. It's a bit more than 15. I don't admit how old I am, so we'll say 15.
15 or so?
Yeah,
Sure.
15 or so.
Good. And during this time, general clients, how many clients have you served over these years?
I think it's difficult because when I started, I did group training and stuff. I'm now doing one-to-one coaching. So the numbers of one-to-one coaching probably is about 120. It's not a huge number. I do probably about 12 a year, 12 individual people a year.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of stakeholder center coaching, how many of those clients have used some form of the stakeholder center coaching tools or process in the engagements?
Okay, it's all everything. I take everybody through some of the processes. I take them through getting feed forward at the start of the program. I get them. Because I want them because managing stakeholders, in my view, is so key to success that I want everybody to have a flavor of it. I want everybody to get a feel of it. Whether they do it more is up to them, but I want everybody to have a feel of it. So I bring quite a lot of Marshall stuff into whenever I work with somebody, I bring a lot of Marshall stuff and a lot of Marshall stories into it.
Okay, so it sounds like feed forward is one of the key tools that you use most frequently. Okay.
Yes.
Good. So yeah, you've got that experience in business. You've got the experience as a coach, and as we start looking at the transition point, how long would you say it took you to go from the first inspiration to become a coach to actually taking that full plunge into the industry?
I think I'm a little bit different. As I say, I sort of fell into it without too much thought. I fell into it without too much thought, but I still had to reinvent myself every couple of years. So what actually happened was I was working at BT. I was going to pay to go on an NLP course. My training manager was quite friendly. He said, "Oh, don't worry, Mike. We'll pay for you to go on it." And actually, they sent me on 3 NLP courses. I obviously convinced somebody of something at that time, and they even let me start my NLP business while I was still there. And I was in this interesting situation where that I won the contract for. I was doing my day job, which was running the strategy of a particular division. And on the side, so every weekend I was working, and a lot of evenings I was working, getting my business going.
Well, would you give us a brief introduction into NLP for our listeners who may not be familiar with the practice?
Yeah, NLP is an interesting thing because some people love it, some people hate it. But that's a huge advantage because by advertising NLP on Google, I get clients. So as I say, the fact that it's not vanilla is actually really, really useful. I really am a bit of a fan of NLP, and it's a good grounding for anybody that wants to increase their communication and influence skills. NLP is basically a modeling skill. That is, we are interested in how people produce results. In doing that, we come out with a heap of techniques. And most people see NLP as techniques, but actually the real skill is modeling. The other thing I'll say about it that's interesting is it works very well with Marshall stuff, because my view is Marshall has some amazingly powerful processes. NLP is very helpful in how you run those processes, in how you actually implement, how do you get in rapport with people, how do you get people to trust you, how do you get people to move in a particular direction. We also do some fascinating stuff around storytelling, around hypnosis, which is hugely fun. I've talked about modeling, about actually asking good questions, asking clean questions, or understanding the reasons for questions. So NLP, if you go through an NLP course, it does blow your mind a bit because it gets you to think differently. It gets you to, it enlarges the way you think. It improves your emotional intelligence a bit. It gets you to connect with your intuition and all this sort of thing, which is a very good basis for other disciplines. Yes. And it's quite fun because just like coaching, I work with people, a small number of people across the world, and I learn from whatever they do. That's one of the things that I've learned from doing the one-to-one stuff rather than the group stuff. To help them, I have to understand where they are and how they think to some extent. And that means I learn from them almost as much as they learn from me, which is cool because it keeps me fresh.
Yeah, it surely helps with reinventing yourself continuously as well.
It does. It does. And I think we're all going to have to reinvent ourselves over the next few years too. I think we're running into a very interesting next 5-10 years where a lot of reinvention will happen, and a lot of people that aren't doing it will suddenly find their jobs disappear and all sorts of things. I think we're going into a very interesting time.
Oh, but Michael, we just had 3 years of radical transformation. You're telling me there's more on the horizon?
Yeah, that's the warm up.
The warm up. Okay.
That was the warm up, and maybe we're going through a quiet period. There's also, I mean, it's like the impacts of AI. There's all sorts of interesting things going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we're all running hot, so I think our warm up is gotten us ready for whatever's next. But tell me a little bit. If I was a leader and I called you up, I said, Michael, I want to be a more effective leader. I have the stakeholders at work, and I'm just not. I need some help doing the right things. Can you use NLP to help me? What would my experience be working with you in an NLP framework?
What would my experience? What would your experience be? In essence, just like the Marshall stuff, this is another thing that I've learned so much from Marshall is I can't work with everybody. I produce very, very good results of the people that choose to work for me. But I agree. I think it was an Alan Mullally comment that one of the secrets of coaching is easy, but one of the secrets is you have to choose the right clients. So the difficult thing is choosing the right clients. And I am continually surprised, but that hits me quite hard. So I spend a lot of time selecting in or selecting out clients, or putting them through a process where they select in or select out themselves.
Tell me about that. How do you select? What are you looking for, and how do you actually judge that when you're looking at a leader who's asking for help?
I've taken a lot out of Marshall's book. I have 4 processes, and 4 things, and I probably forget them now. But the first one is Marshall's thing. I add my own spin to it, because I actually say to people, to get the very best out of what I do, you need a touch of ambition, courage, discipline, and openness. I've thrown in ambition because I'm sure all Marshall's clients are ambitious anyway, but I like to add that as an extra one. We have to choose each other. So I have to choose you and you have to choose me. And if either of us doesn't like each other, we walk away. That's absolutely fine. And I mean, this sounds a bit strange, but they have to be happy to pay if they get good results.
Okay. It sounds like you're then also using the results guarantee proposition. Is that correct?
Not so much, but it's most of the people. It's a bit like Marshall. If you get people to run the process, it works. If you get the right people to run through the process and they've got reasonable stakeholders, it will work. And it's the same with me. But I don't explicit that, but I don't take people on without saying those words. And there is, and I do believe Alan Mullally's comment to anybody starting off in coaching, the real art is finding and selecting the right clients.
Absolutely.
Because you learn so much. You learn so much from your clients. Because they're almost teaching you. It's like you've got a number of people around the world testing things out for you. So I know that sounded a bit wrong, but you've got a number of people out in the world testing different approaches, and you are in the privileged position of finding out what works, which actually helps your future clients.
Good. Well, Michael, I have one question I have to ask, because an audience member reached out to me and asked me personally that I ask this question and that I make it a mainstay of most interviews with coaches. So we're going to give this a whirl this time. It's a fascinating question, I think, that many will want to hear, but few have asked. And it made me laugh. I hope it gives you a giggle too. But the question was, how do you describe what you do, especially when the person has no idea what you do? And the second phrasing of this that was suggested is, how do you describe coaching to your mother?
Okay, let's take the first one first. Let us take the first one first. And funnily enough, because I only came up with this yesterday. I only came up with this yesterday because somebody asked me a sticky question. Somebody asked me a similar question, but my current version is I help leaders, entrepreneurs. I help leaders. Sorry, I help people on their leadership, entrepreneurial, and relationship journey, and that's it. I help people be successful. Actually, there's another word in there. I help people be successful on their leadership, their entrepreneur, and their relationship journey, and that's what I do.
That's crisp. What questions usually follow that?
We just get into what they want. I mean, I like asking the questions first. It's like whenever I have a first meeting with a potential client, before they say anything, I just say to them, what will make this meeting useful to you? So I'll always start off, if I can, getting them to, for all sorts of reasons, getting them to say what would make it useful for them almost before I talk. And in fact, I don't talk too much about me at all. I'm much more interested in building a picture. I'm much more interested in being a catalyst in letting them build a picture of what they want.
Well, not talking about yourself much, this interview must be a little bit uncomfortable then, huh?
Well, I'm learning to be okay with discomfort. I am finally learning to be okay with discomfort. A huge skill.
It is. And, it's funny that this question was posed because, of all the people who come back and say, I don't really know exactly what you do. Can you describe it again? It's my mom. And I keep banging my head against the wall thinking, what part of this am I not explaining clearly? But it sounds like with what you have a really nice, clear sentence that's going to beget more questions. And that seems to be the secret.
That's right. That's basically the idea.
Okay.
I mean, I could say more on the subject, but I'll leave it there.
This is what we're here for, Michael. Lay it on me.
No. There's a very good Sandler approach, Sandler's a sales system that I quite like, which is where you actually, if you're introducing yourself to somebody who you don't know, you say something like, I work with these sorts of people and they get these sorts of benefits from working with me. Does any of this resonate you, or are you interested in something else? There's a structure there that I really like. Because in essence, we work well with a certain group of people, so we must well let them know who they are. So you can choose whoever you want. I work with CEOs, or I work with ambitious executives, or it doesn't matter what it is, but I work with X on these sorts of issues, and typically they get these sorts of benefits. Do you relate to this, or is there something else you'd like to talk about?
I like that. And for those of you who are listening at home, if you're on your drive or listening in at the gym, send us an email. Tell us, how do you describe your profession, especially to someone who has no idea what coaching or leadership training, any of this is. Send it to me, podcast@mgscc.net. I'm incredibly curious to hear. And I like the way Marshall uses his line. I help successful leaders become more successful. It's got to be snappy and it's got to be intriguing enough to ask those questions. So I would want to ask you, Michael, because you have such good questions that you ask both from the very first meeting as well as through your NLP, what other really valuable questions could you share with our audience and encourage them to ask their clients when they're coaching?
I'm going to answer a different question, if I may.
Please
I'm very
do.
good at not answering questions, actually. I'm very skilled. Because I was a buyer, I'm so used to asking other people questions that I've learned an ability. So I'm going to ask a different question. And I'm going to answer a different question. And the questions I'm going to answer is, what are we doing when we ask questions? I'm doing a much more top level. What are we doing when we ask questions? And I think there are three main reasons for asking questions. One is to get information, and particularly to get accurate information. One is to lead their emotions, because we can ask a question which will lead them to a positive emotional state. One is to lead how they think, because we're asking a question because actually questions lead the way people think. And I think that's a useful way of approaching how we want to plan questions. What is the actual outcome of the question? What are we actually trying to do? And there are lots of questioning techniques. There are lots of questioning techniques. One of the NLP things is something called the meta model, where we ask questions based on people's language. When we want to, so we don't need to know any content. We ask questions based on people's language, which means which forces us to listen, because we actually have to listen very carefully to the words. But it means whatever anybody says, we can always ask a question. And that is tremendously liberating, actually, when you know whatever anybody says to you, however much they may be trying to phase you, you can always ask a question about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, on the point of, let's say, a philosophical point, I'll pose the question. What role do leading questions play in a coaching engagement? And I ask this because there are large players in the space that have taken a pretty harsh stance against leading questions, and then others that fully embrace them and utilize them for their full potential. Okay. What's your take on it?
I'm still going to ask you a question. What's your definition of a leading question?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, you must be an NLP trainer.
Seriously, what's your definition of leading question?
Yeah, I'll venture a guess. I mean, I'll venture a definition, but I hope that I'm not held to this. I would think that a leading question is one that the correct answer is already known, and that it's asked in a way to force someone to respond in a particular way. Although that's a very pejorative definition. I don't mean that pejoratively at all.
No, okay.
What's your...
the answer? Sorry, the answer is everything is. I'm sorry about this. Everything is context specific.
Okay.
Everything is context specific, and I'll give you another way we can ask questions, which is where you work out what is true to the other person, and you ask questions where you'll get genuine yes answers.
Oh, okay.
And the reasons you may want, and I say, if this is done, if you fake this, it sounds terrible. But if you do it for real, like you're doing it genuinely, it works really well. There's an argument when people first meet us that they are testing us for being truth or lie. That, naturally two people meet, in the old tribal thing, is he a friend or is he an enemy? And if you ask questions where either the person is confused or they say no to, you might go into the enemy camp. So basically, there's an argument where you ask questions where people will genuinely answer yes. So you get them in the habit of asking yes. And only when you've built some rapport and they're comfortable with you, do you move to potentially asking challenging questions.
Okay.
Let that flow. This is something you learn from him if you study hypnosis. I know it sounds a bit weird and wonderful, but there's an old sales technique called the yes technique, okay? And if it's done terribly, it falls flat. But if you do it naturally and comfortably, and the interesting thing is, you have to think in advance, what is the person likely to say yes to? And that sort of forces you to work out who they are, what's important to them, all this sort of thing. I'm sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, but it's another reason for asking questions.
I appreciate this kind of dialogue immensely, Michael, and please, you have my full permission to rehash any question or rephrase it, throw it back, whatever you like. This is what we're here for. So ladies and gentlemen, strap in. It sounds like it's going to be a wild ride. But, a key value I really want to lead in these conversations is vulnerability. And if you'd be willing to, I'd love to hear an example or even just test out this technique. What could you tell us or show us so that we could better understand just how contextual the leading questions can be, or how to actually ask good leading questions?
I'm going to answer a different question, but please push me back. You are allowed. I say this to my clients, by the way. I do warn by the way, I say couple of things I say to my clients. I always say, you have a red card, you have a black card. If I talk too much, raise the card and tell me to shut up, and I'll ask you questions.
Okay.
Because when I started coaching, I used to ask all questions, and I didn't say enough. It didn't quite work. I then went to a phase when I used to talk too much, and now I know sometimes I can talk too much. So I make sure I ask my clients permission. I give my clients permission at all times. They're the boss, so they can always shut me up.
Okay, I like it.
That didn't. And then something else, because you brought up the vulnerability thing. Okay.
Hmm.
And my view now, if you want to create trust, if you want to create rapport with people, I have 4 different approaches for doing it. One is you're a bit of an alpha male, because some people like alpha males. One is you, and this is the NLP thing, you're like them, because generally we like people like us, because if we're like somebody, we come from the same tribe, all that sort of stuff. There's some very deep stuff going in. We understand ourselves. If somebody's like us, then we understand them. And that can be speaking at the same speed as them, repeating occasionally some of their words back, not overdoing it. As soon as people fake this stuff, it looks terrible. But it's what we do naturally anyway. We sort of, when we're working with somebody, you can tell if you're in a bar and you look at people, you can tell who's in rapport, who's working together, who isn't. And there's something about, we like people like ourselves because we understand ourselves. So the second one is likeness. The third one is talking about what's important to them. If we happen to know, that's why I asked the question right at the beginning, what would make this meeting useful to me, useful to you? Because if you answer me, I know what's important, and I talk about what's important to you, then you'll get into rapport with me because you want to know what I say because it matches what you want. So the third one is to talk about what's important to the other person. And the fourth one, which sounds totally counterintuitive, is be vulnerable. Sharing vulnerability brings, not with everybody, but sharing a vulnerability, telling a story where you fucked up or you've done something wrong, actually builds human connection. So if I'm interested in developing rapport, and it doesn't work with everybody, but what I do is based to increase the chances of getting into rapport, there are 4 different approaches, which can work very well. And the last one, the vulnerability, was a real surprise. Was a real surprise to me because I wouldn't have believed it. I've now read lots of stuff that confirm it. I wouldn't have believed it, but I went through a particular time in my life, and it's too interesting for me to tell you what it is. But I went through a particular time in my life where there was something I thought I would never share, but I shared it with a number of people, and actually it strengthened the relationship. The fact that I had, because being vulnerable, it sounds weak, but it requires courage. And you don't want to do it with everybody, but actually it's like taking your clothes off. It's like taking away a bit of your emotional armor. And often, some people it will frighten because they do not want to take their armor off under any circumstances. But other people relax and say, "Oh God, this is a guy. Sorry, this is a guy I can talk to. This is somebody I can share what's really important to me." So 4 ideas for building rapport.
Yeah, let's recap those one more time just for the people listening on the drive.
Being a bit of an alpha, you're a bit of a leader. You're the person you're the person they want to become. So a bit of an alpha is 1. 2 is to be like them, share something in common with them. Number 3 is you talk about what's genuinely important to them, and number 4, you declare some vulnerability.
I like that. And, on this topic of vulnerability, especially necessary as we pivot towards, the actual transition, the transition into coaching. So, with your permission, I'd love to drill down in vulnerability as we talk about failures. And I'd like to start with a central piece of most careers, which is the family unit. Can you tell us a little bit about how that conversation unfolded with your family, starting with, what was their reaction to the news that you're going to move into coaching?
Okay. Well, I was divorced at the time. I'm still very friendly with my ex-wife, and I'm obviously friendly with my 3 kids and grandkids and all that sort of thing. They were all happy I was doing what I wanted to do. Their view was, their view was they were happy with what I was doing, because they weren't terribly pleased with all my corporate life, because my corporate life I was working too long. I wasn't always the cheerfulest person. So actually, from their point of view, I actually became a lot more human.
Okay. It's weird to think. I mean, given how long I've known you, it's weird to think of you not as a cheery person.
I can do sadness.
Okay. We'll get to that point for vulnerability then. Did that support and their kind of undying willingness to back you in this, did that give you confidence to tackle this project, or did that give you?
I think one of the things that's supposed to lead to people being happy or fulfilled or whatever word is good relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So my view is, in any context, we become a lot more resilient if we have people around us that support us and love us and whatever words you want to use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Was there skepticism? Like, there was support. Was there skepticism that maybe this isn't going to work out? We're going to have to go back to
They were skeptical about me anyway. They were skeptical. I had built a sufficient degree of skepticism in them.
That's good. We all need that, right?
No, I have to say, this is a different. It's an NLP story, but I think it's quite fun. I took my 3 kids to Orlando to play on the swings and roundabouts, and to do a persuasion engineering course, which was a hypnosis persuasion course. And my kids were sort of 7, 8, 9, that sort of thing, and my daughter was 7, maybe a couple of years older, but it was that sort of thing. And my oldest son loved it, and my middle son was absolutely, really got into it. And my daughter said to me, "Mike, Dad, that was a load of rubbish." in true female form. However, and sorry, this may be a bit sexist, and I apologize if it is, she then used all the techniques on me totally ruthlessly for the next 10 years.
Wow.
So she picked a lot up. My view is my view is women are very good at some of this stuff, and they do it naturally, and it just tuned her up a bit. It sort of gave her permission to do what she'd do naturally.
Well, at this point in your story, you've got your significant business experience, you've got people management skills, and you've shared the career transition with your family with good effect. But tell me about your personal experience preparing for this role as an NLP trainer and as a coach. Was it scary? Did you feel confident? Were you nervous at all?
That was natural, but the cost to me, as I say, was this bit about every 2 years I've had to reinvent myself. Mm-hmm. So for me, the transition wasn't particularly scary, but don't assume that it was a painless journey, I think is the way I would put it. I was lucky. The transition bit wasn't difficult. But I still had to go through. I still had to do this. What am I going to do? Where do I get clients? All that sort of thing is an ongoing process. Mm-hmm. So the transition to me was an ongoing transition, not just a one-off. Well, however, I do coach quite a lot of want-to-be coaches and that sort of thing, and I always suggest to them, don't do what I did. You want to plan it early. You want to give yourself a long enough runway. If you can, give yourself a long enough runway. Start getting clients as soon as possible. They may be just people you're coaching free, but and I also say to new coaches, there's 3 things you need to do. In my view, you need to be able to look after yourself, you need to be able to market, and you need to be good at coaching. But being good at coaching may be the least important. Because your clients will always teach you coaching. If you have good clients, they will teach you coaching. And you can always pick up process. You can always pick up, Marshall's process. You can pick up NLP process, but you have to get clients. Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at it as the priority that way, rather than people going for coaching degrees and all this sort of thing, and then trying to get clients at the end. They may be successful, but they are not necessarily going, in my view, on the easiest route.
Oh, yes. You're singing my song now, Michael. I mean, probably one of the most broken record phrases you'll hear me say is exactly that. Go out. Your first clients need to be pro bono. Scale them so you've got one starting after a couple months, you've got another after a couple months, you've got another, and then start charging. But nobody wants to work. No one wants to be a coach's first client. You've got to break that barrier.
And there's something else that I think is important. That and it goes back to this thing of choosing the right clients. And in a way, if you're coach now, if I coach somebody for free, because I will occasionally coach people for free for various reasons, but it's actually even more important you take the right people on.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Because what I've seen happen, that some potentially very good coaches, they've chosen the wrong clients when they're at this early stage. The client hasn't done anything, and the coaches blame themselves, and it's sort of dissuaded them from coaching. So there's something I do suggest to people is you've got to have a go at you've got to get out there and because this is let me put it this way. Nowadays I've come to the conclusion that failing is the best way to learn. I didn't like to think like that. And there's another story we'll come up to where rejection, people saying bad things about you, are often good signs. And things not working shows you're trying something. Now, I don't want to be too much of a fan of not success and failure, because we're all looking to succeed. But most of the time now, I think failure is on the route to success. Mm-hmm. That we have to pass through a certain amount of failure in order to succeed. And if I was looking back, I would have liked to have failed more. Yes, looking back, I would have liked to have failed more.
That's wisdom. That's wisdom. It reminds me of there's a wonderful design firm in Northern California who had the mantra fail fast to succeed early. The faster you figure it out.
But we're all being brought up not to do that. I'm generalizing, but certainly I've been brought up. That was not programmed into me. Mm-hmm. But actually, when we're trying anything new, we just don't. We have to try to find out what works. Mm-hmm. It's all test and learn.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said
there's another one that on the same topic that I think. It's like sometimes I think I failed, but I haven't. This may sound strange, that sometimes something in my life, and I think it's gone terribly wrong, when I look back with a distance of time, actually that failure is what led me to success. So I think we can have an emotional thing, and we can react in a way when something doesn't go how we think it ought to go, but that doesn't mean we haven't benefited from it, and it's really helped us in our lives. It's a bit bizarre, but it's happened so many times now that I don't trust my view of failure. Mm-hmm. That needs a bit of unpacking, but if you can get a vague view of what I'm saying.
What you're reminding me of is a story that I frequently will use in coaching when we talk about failure, and I'd like to read it. I just pulled this up.
Yes.
It's the proverb of the Chinese farmer. Does this ring any bells for you, Michael?
It will do as you carry on. So carry on.
I came across this with one of my private consulting clients, and I keep coming back to this, both whether it has to do with business, entrepreneurialism, coaching, or even just with my family. So here's a story. I just Google searched Parable of the Chinese Farmer. A farmer and his family in China owned a horse. His neighbors said how lucky he was to have such a fine horse to pull his plow through the fields, and the farmer said, maybe. One day the horse broke down the gate and ran away. All his neighbors came around to lament his terrible loss, saying it was a terrible bit of bad luck, and the farmer said, maybe. Days later, the horse returned to the farm along with 7 wild horses. His neighbors came around to exclaim his remarkable good fortune, saying, now you're rich. And the farmer said, maybe. A few weeks later, the farmer's son was training the new wild horses and fell off and broke his leg. The neighbors came around to commiserate his misfortune and said, what bad luck you have. And the farmer said, maybe. The next week, the army came around taking all of the able-bodied young men from the village to fight in the war. The farmer's son with a broken leg was left behind, and the neighbors now lamented the loss of the son's ability to move, and commented on how lucky the farmer was that the son got to stay. And the farmer said, maybe. And we never really know what is a success or a failure until much later beyond the event. And I like to use this in coaching for circumstances you just described that we don't know, but what we do know is we're going to learn from this one way or another.
Absolutely. But it takes a long time to learn that. It can take a long time to learning it. And with my NLP hat on, it's like the emphasis has been taken off goals. We still need goals to measure how we're doing, but the main thing is we set a direction of where we want to go, we take action every day, and we monitor what we're doing. And if we do that, we will always improve.
Mm-hmm.
And individual goals, we need to be careful because many of my clients are too goal focused and they just beat themselves up when they don't achieve a goal, but that doesn't do them any good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So to me, something that is important is setting a direction of where we want to go. It's a bit like a compass point. And sometimes we're gonna succeed, sometimes we're not. It doesn't matter. Providing we keep taking action to get there, we will get there. It's a system rather than an individual goal.
Yes. And like you said, it's the process that matters. The process will lead to the
and that's a bit boring, but the process is a bit boring, but the process is what matters.
We want the magic bullet,
yeah,
not the hard work. Well, you said the transition was much. You said the transition was fairly simple, but it wasn't without pain. Tell us a little bit about that side of the transition.
What, the pain?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying. I am trying to think. I think one of the first pains was clients which didn't get the value that I wanted them to get. And this all goes back to how I've restructured what I was doing. But obviously, I'm not going to say who it was, but there was somebody that I knew that paid up front for a full program. And I thought they wanted some business stuff, and they had a problem. They had a problem with their wife, and I wasn't capable of helping them solve that. But they sort of went away, and I sort of felt a little bit guilty about it. And again, it's what's so fascinating is when you look at problems. Sometimes, as a coach, the problem isn't set up to be solvable because you're given a problem that involves other people that you don't have access to. I'm not explaining this very well, but some problems are structured in such a way that you almost have no chance of solving them at all. And I didn't realize it. I didn't realize it at that time. The good thing, so I still feel a bit guilty about it because I say he paid me his money, and in the end, for reasons I just because he left, I decided not to pay his money back because I thought he's paid it to me. He broke the he broke the contract. But that's the reason now I give people 3 sessions. I give people 3 free sessions because in essence I want to be absolutely clear that we both know what they want. That what they haven't come to ask for something, and then when we start working, they actually want something totally different. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely, it's bold.
Sometimes clients do not quite express what they want, and sometimes clients will come up with a solution that they think they want, but they don't. They haven't done any pre-work before it. Mm-hmm. So, as I say, but the result for me was, and he was a friend too, which made it even worse. So it was there were things like that that sort of really disappointed me and did bring me down a bit.
Mm-hmm. That's tough.
As an example, but that's why I say we have to keep reinventing ourselves, because it's like what I do works. I'm making the figure up, but what I do works really well with 90% of my clients. But 10% of them it doesn't. 10%, to be honest, it's actually a better percentage than that. But there's a percentage where it just doesn't work, or it doesn't work as well as we would want.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the way that you solve many of these problems that come up as a coach. And a whole other fascinating aspect of your story outside of that is entrepreneurialism. This can be seen ranging from the way that you run your business as an owner, the many services you offer, and even, some of the academic endeavors with Henley Business School that we haven't even broached yet. But as you began your coaching journey, would you say that entrepreneurialism was something that motivated you, or was it something that you perhaps steered away from or avoided?
No, I think it was a motivation. I think I always wanted to be an entrepreneur in some form. I never quite got round to it. and so entrepreneur and many of my clients are entrepreneurs, because many of my clients are starting businesses, not always coaching businesses. So, and I have a great respect, because it takes courage to be an entrepreneur, because you're starting something that is unproven, and you're building something that is totally new, and you're doing what the country needs in many ways, because we need to come up with new ideas and doing things. And I think, again, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to be okay failing, because if you're starting a totally new idea, the chances of it working first time are actually very small. So it's almost this: you start it, you reduce your risks as much as you can, and you're okay if it doesn't work. What I found is, what's interesting is, it may not work, but you'll learn something that will help you next time. Mm-hmm. In fact, there are lots of things in life, and it's why the word failure, I think, can be often misused, because every time you do something and learn something, you're increasing your odds of doing it right next time, or doing it better next time. And if you can keep going, you will always succeed. And it's back to what you're saying. It's a system. It's not a one-off goal. It's developing a system. Mm-hmm. And so keep going.
As an entrepreneur, what were some of the really hard lessons that you had to take on early on?
I think it's our relationship with what people call failure. Mm-hmm. And I go back and it's a realization now. I mean, I went through it and I was okay, so I'm not moaning about it at all. But now looking back, as I said to you before, I would be happier failing more, and I would be happy telling me bad things, because we're all sort of taught to be nice. I'm not saying this quite in the right way, but in essence, it's okay. Messing up is okay. Some people won't like you, whatever you do, and while you obviously don't want to do it for extremes, actually, if you fail, if people say not nice things about you, at least you've done something. And the worst thing you can do is not do anything. And I think that's what entrepreneur thing is about. Also, back to the entrepreneur thing, it ties yet again in with the stakeholder thing. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you need to manage all your stakeholders. You need to work out who your stakeholders are, and you need to work out how to influence them. You need to work out how you find out what's important to them. And it's quite fun. Sorry, just a fun bit. It's quite funny on my entrepreneur thing. A guy that I coached when I was 18, I did a bit of free coaching with him. 3 years. He's now 20. He was 18 when I started. He's now 24. He's just bought his first Ferrari, which is bloody difficult to get out of. To get out of. And he started his own business. He does currency. He offers currency services, which is one of the hardest sales out. And he started his business now. He's been running it for 6 months. He's doing well. He's taken his first 3 people on, and it was really cool. He asked me to do a team meeting with him and his 3 people, and they're all wannabe whiz kids. They're all absolute, they're 18 or something, but they're all out there to make their fortunes. And it was one of the most fun sessions, team building sessions I've ever run. Something's a bit extra, but I can't tell you all the story, because we discussed a whole heap of very interesting subjects.
Well, it's a fascinating story, and we love to hear these success stories. But coming back to entrepreneurialism, what would you say has been one of the biggest challenges in running your coach practice?
What's the biggest challenge in running my coach practice? I think the challenge is always getting. It comes down to getting the right clients. Everything else is easy to solve. Well, sorry, in my point of view, providing we listen and we're happy to be continual learners, the key is getting the right clients. Because if you get the right clients, they pay you well, they tell everybody how good you are, you learn a lot, you enjoy it. If you get the wrong clients, it can hit your ego, it can hit your confidence. They don't want to pay you, they tell everybody that you're lousy, and you wonder why on earth you got out of bed. So that differentiation, I'm being serious.
Mhm.
That differentiation, the challenge is finding the right clients. Everything else is easy after that.
When you say finding the right clients, is this a matter of distilling down to choosing filtering out who is right and who is wrong, or is this
Well, you
simply
need a big enough
attracting?
funnel. Well, you need both, because it means you need to attract more. So, because there's nothing worse than, from a cash flow point of view, you have to deal with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
That's the worst possible case. So you need to do both. It means you need a reasonable sized funnel, and you then need to be comfortable to select out the people you want.
Mm-hmm.
Which I go back to. You want to start thinking of marketing or attracting clients right at the beginning, because
Mm-hmm.
if you do that right, everything is easy. Sorry, this is from my perspective. If you do that right, everything is easy, because then the good clients recommend you, and you come back to them, and they do different programs with you, etc., etc. So I think I go back to, it's somebody's passion might be coaching. This is the challenge. Somebody's real passion might be coaching, not getting clients, but they
Mm-hmm.
can't coach until they get clients. So I think that's there's something about cash flow. Obviously always look at cash flow. The rest of the finances will look after itself, but you need to obviously look at cash flow, and please look after yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You are a hero on a journey. I go through the classic hero's journey with all my clients, which they initially don't like. In fact, when I first heard the hero's journey, I thought it was so negative that I didn't dare share it with my clients. I then talked to one or two business owners that have been successful, and they said, Mike, that's exactly how it does. Don't believe all the crap everybody tells you about it's easy and all this. It's a hero's journey. You will fail. You will
Mm-hmm.
meet your biggest fears. But that's how you learn.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only when people said, Mike, yeah, that's exactly it. Don't believe all the other stuff. That's exactly how it is. If anybody's on and I liken it in life, because that's where it came from, because it's a mix of all the metaphors, all the stories in life, turned into one story. And anybody that's doing anything that's a challenge will go through those steps. And I think that people are, if people understand that before they start, and you plan for it, then the whole thing becomes much easier.
Mm.
But if you believe some of the propaganda that some people will sell you, and you're going to get, you're going to get a huge amount of money back within 6 months, then it's going to disappoint you. And curiously enough, I think the same thing goes with when we're coaching clients. In a way, I prefer to set less expectations initially, more expectations longer term, because I believe the Bill Gates thing, we overestimate what we can do tomorrow, we underestimate what we can do in a year or 2 years. So I almost prefer to make the journey appear slightly harder, so that when they actually achieve a lot more than what I've initially said, they're really grateful, rather than giving them too higher expectation too early, because then if they get disappointed, they get really disappointed, and it hits their motivation to continue. It's a tricky call, because when we sell things, we obviously want to be positive when we sell things, but it's this balance of being honest about the journey that they need to take. And that's why I think Marshall is so good with his, you need a touch of, as I say, I do it as ambition, courage, and discipline, and honesty. It's actually saying to people, look, this is about your success. You have to put something in to make yourself successful. And patience can be a virtue.
Mm-hmm. So this is brilliant. I want to unpack this and make sure that we all can put this in our pocket and use it tomorrow. What I've heard from you is you use the hero's journey, which admittedly paints a bit of a bleak picture. Then on the other side, you set very, very small goals. The goals that my coach Bill Zeeb would say, set them so low that if you don't hit them, it's shameful. Don't plan to go exercise, just put on your socks. Like, you can put on your socks. That's all you have to do. And you use that to build momentum. Later on, that kind of counteracts the earlier negativity or bleakness. Later on, you ramp up the challenge, but they've built that momentum to really feel that they're achieving success. Have I described that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's how it works. And people will nearly always achieve more than they originally thought, a lot more than they originally thought.
Mm. I like that.
And it applies to all changes of life. It isn't just coaching, it applies to all the big challenges we have in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to transition now with the wisdom of General Omar Bradley, who went on to become the first chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the U.S. military. On the topic of being a great leader, he's quoted with saying that the greatness of a leader is measured by the achievements of the led. The greatness of a leader is measured by the achievements of the led. And I like this because it speaks so directly to the outcome of great leadership. Now, you as a coach, you are leading the leader. So let's talk about some of the achievements of your clients. And instead of starting with the exceptional before and after, let's start with kind of what anyone could expect from working with you. So when clients come to you as a coach, what are some of the typical results they can expect?
Okay. Well, actually, I start it the other way around because I actually start with what they want to achieve. As I say,
okay.
my first conversation as a client is what would make this useful for you. I then take them through a three session process, and that 3-session process is to establish what they really want. Okay, because I want them to establish what they really want and work out for themselves the value of getting it, because it's just Marshall stuff, because that actually makes them more motivated to go through the downs on the route to get it. So and my view as a coach is to help them on their journey, and my view of so it's their result. It's nothing to do with me in a way. It's what they achieve, and whether I can speed their journey up, I can make the journey more fun and remove some of the pain that they would otherwise have, and end up with them getting much bigger results than they otherwise would do. And in a way, I'm finding it difficult to measure this, but if you actually look at what the clients get in relation to the cost of coaching, it is very small. The cost of coaching is very small in relation to what clients achieve. It's like if somebody starts a business or takes their business to the next level, or finds a new relationship. It doesn't matter what it is, but if you actually look at the lifetime value of what you've helped them do, the actual coaching costs are almost insignificant. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that I personally really believe in this is I go back to certain times in my life where if I had a coach, now I would have to have believed in them, but if I had a coach, there are pains and challenges in my life that if I had the right person guiding me, I wouldn't have had to suffer. So I am very, very conscious that the right coach at the right time for the right person can make a huge difference to their lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that I know that you've created exceptional results with, some of the joint projects that I've had the privilege of working on with you. And I know that you bring a number of coaching tools to the table. So in addition to stakeholder center coaching and NLP, are there other auxiliary tools or techniques, skills that you bring to your engagements?
I'm a great fan. I think we all, as human beings, I'm going to go really basic here, as human beings, we are human beings. And you've got to remember that we all have cognitive biases, we all have blind spots, we all have egos. Okay. And two human beings working together will always providing the person you're working with is prepared to listen to you, will always do better than the person on their own. So I'm actually saying, forget all the skills. As a human being, we are naturally bringing skills and things that will help the process. As far as answering your question goes, one of the guys I really like is Ray Dalio. I like his principles, and I do bring a lot of his stuff into what I do. There are a number of people I listen to. I listen to Mark Manson, who used to be a seduction guy, but now he's a life guy. I really love his stuff. He wrote 2 famous books. He wrote a seduction book, which is brilliant. He wrote a book on the art of being fucked or something like that, and then the continual art of being fucked. And they are so good. They are. I almost cried through them. They're just so good. So I do have a number of people that I read and absorb their stuff. But if you ask for one, obviously it's Marshall, obviously it's Richard Band from NLP, but I do like Ray Dalio's stuff.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, hopefully we'll be able to include some links in our show notes. As you and many of our audience members know, stakeholder-centered coaching is, branded for its systematic approach to leadership development, which means you can expect roughly equivalent results and roughly equivalent outcomes, regardless of which coach you work with. And so as a result, we encourage coaches to develop their own subject matter expertise in order to differentiate themselves to the clients and what additional values they bring. So in all of the years that you have spent studying, training, and practicing, which domains would you say that you own as a coach?
Okay. Well, as I said, it's the space I'm in is leadership, entrepreneurs, and relationships. I don't do too much about relationships, but for some reason I have a lot of female clients, and they're interested. They're interested in that sort of stuff. So between us we work things out. So can you give me an example? I am obviously fudging my answer.
Sure.
Give me an illustration of what you say. Yeah, of what you're looking for.
Well, I know that there are 3 purposes to any question, Michael, and the purpose of this question, the purpose of this one. Well, what I'm really looking for, it's information. I want to know if I'm sitting and I'm listening to you speak today, how will I know that you are most likely or very likely to be that right coach at the right time for the right problem with the right person? How would I identify that? And, that could be your skills. It could be the achievements.
By making an appointment with me and having my 3 sessions.
How would someone go about doing that, Michael, since we're on the topic?
Basically, if you go to any of my websites, I have a time trade thing. You just book a session in my calendar. Mm-hmm. So anybody in the world, I give you the URL of the website, so you have to hunt through the websites to find out where you book. But it's nlp-techniques.org and nlp-training.org.
Perfect, and they can go there and get some of these sessions.
The way I work it, anybody can have one. Anybody can have one free session. If they're serious, they can have 3 sessions.
And how do you judge that? How do you know when someone's serious?
That's a very good question, and I need to improve. and I need to improve it. Basically, I'll say to them, the 3 sessions of somebody that's genuine. The purpose of the 3 sessions is because, remember, one of my views is that the client needs to choose the coach and the coach needs to choose the client. Mm-hmm. So there's no hold if you do the 3 sessions. I'm very happy you go off because it's actually saving us both a lot of time. That's the rejection thing. It's actually saving us both. If you want to do it, you will get benefit out of it. If you don't want to do it, you have no pressure to do it because we're wasting each other's time. After the first session, let's find out what they want to achieve. And funnily enough, if I can help them in one session, I'll do it free anyway. If there's something I think I can help them with, then I'll do it with them anyway. But it's normally only take the 3 sessions if you generally are prepared to move forward if it works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Good, yeah.
It does.
It's an open offer, but I get really pissed off when people are doing it. People are trying to be clever and do the 3 sessions for the sake of doing the 3 sessions because it doesn't really work.
Yeah. You got to be honest in this, but your point is reminiscent of Gary Vee's hiring concept, and I encourage coaches to think about picking clients as hiring. Is that hiring is guessing, firing is knowing. You don't have to know who can go forward. you can guess, but once you know that they're not the right person, this has been great. Thank you. Goodbye.
I love it.
Yeah, I think that's important. So then if I am looking at different coaching companies, I'm looking at different
Right.
techniques, what would set your coaching practice apart from others in the industry? Or why would a client specifically pick you, Michael Beale, as a
Okay.
coach over someone else?
Luckily, some people recommend me. luckily, some people recommend me. On the NLP front, I'm the only. I'm a Richard Bandler trainer, and he's one of the co-founders. And for some interesting reason, he's the only one I'm the only one he lets do this one-to-one stuff.
Okay.
Because everybody else has to do it in a group. Okay. So the advantage of doing it one-to-one is that we can focus much more on what you want, because if you're doing it in a group, you'd never have that opportunity. Because we're doing it over a longer length of time, I'm still here when things go wrong. If you go on a 9-day course, you leave it, that's it, mate. But if you're with me and things go wrong after 3 months, I'm here to help you sort it out. And often the best learning is when things go wrong, and that's when you actually need help to put yourself on the track. And also because I do it over a longer period of time, like with the Marshall process, it's about establishing good habits. And if you go on a short course, you learn a lot, but you may not have turned it into a habit. If you're working with somebody for 6 months or a year, it's much more likely that you turn the good stuff into habits, and that will lead to your future success.
Are most of your engagements in that 6-month range, would you say?
I tend not to do less than 6 months. There are a big chunk of clients that have probably worked with me for 3 years. After 3 years, it's time for us to have a break. But everybody has a different reason. Everybody has a different reason for working. And some people, sorry, this may sound not quite right, but some people just enjoy having somebody, I'm using all the wrong words here, somebody that they can actually talk to to listen through their stuff. And having a sounding board is really useful for them.
Absolutely. I can absolutely empathize with that and agree wholeheartedly, in fact. Michael, a coach like you has a lot to be proud of and equally an amount to share. So stakeholder-centered coaching is all about feed forward and action planning as it relates to stakeholders. So in that spirit of helping our listeners enrich their own action plans, I'd like to ask you for some feed forward on behalf of some members of our audience. And what I'd like for you to do is just to simply provide some insight or advice for these individuals and audience groups that I think you could help. Does that sound good?
It does. I'm not totally sure what you want. Are you looking for some do's, don'ts? What's the...
Yeah, so I'll start with, if I'm a brand new coach, I'm just starting out and I hear Michael Beale's story, I think that's the career I want to build. That's the career I want to work towards. What's just one piece of advice that you could give them on their journey?
One piece of advice. The struggle is worth it. I don't want to overrank the pain, because actually whatever we do in life requires resilience and determination and those sorts of things. And coaching is no exception. The point I will make is, although many coaches give up, all the ones that I've known that have continued are really grateful that they have. Because there is something about you take something that's actually quite challenging and quite difficult, and you find ways of achieving it. There is a huge amount of satisfaction when you've done it, and also there is a thought that you are doing something that genuinely is helping others. It's helping you too, but it's genuinely helping others. So it is a bit of a hero's journey. Do not. It is better to expect it's going to be tough than expecting it's going to be too easy. And I hope it's too easy for you. But my view is, like planning. It was fascinating actually. One of my clients climbed Everest twice. Okay.
Wow.
And when you climb Everest, it was fascinating. It was a fascinating story. It was a girl in Poland, and this is only 30 seconds, but it shows that sometimes doing things outside the box works. She was a a girl in Poland. She decided she wanted to come to the UK. She wrote to the 100 richest men in Poland saying, will you support me? 2 of them said, yes, we'll support you coming to the UK. One said, I've got to, but I do expect you to work for me afterwards. And she said, no, mate. The other one said he'd pay the money and she could do what she wanted. So she actually came to the UK and joined a merchant bank. She then decided in her thing she wanted to climb the biggest peak in every continent.
Wow.
And when she came for me for coaching, she wanted to climb Everest. And I don't know if you know Everest, but you have to raise about 30,000 pounds, but whatever the figure is, $30,000 to get all the people you need to get you even to base camp. So you've got to raise lots of money. So she raised the money. And with Everest, she was saying that you get all the stories of people dying and you climb over dead bodies. This is what she was telling me. She was going up, but it was quite fun because she actually got to the top of Everest. And then, by the way, with Everest, you start dying at the top because of the pressures and the oxygen and all that sort of thing. So you can't mess around. Coming down is very dangerous because if you don't get down quick enough, you sort of expire. If you dance around congratulating yourself for being too much at the top. Now, these are all stories. I've never been up there, so I'm not going to say what's actually true. But you can't afford to spend too much time at the top because things are happening to your body. But she said it was a little bit like God. Anyway, a little bit like near heaven because you're sort of touching the universe. Anyway, she then came back, and then about 6 months later, she said, "Mike, that was too easy. I'm going up the hard way." So she actually went up again by a different route, and she succeeded in that. Funny enough, she's become a coach now. she's become a coach now.
That's
but after
poetic.
doing all, I'd finish in a second, but she did all the mountains. Then she decided to do the desert. Okay. And when she did her first desert expedition, she actually hated it because she said when she was up in a mountain, it was a being like the heavens, that actually when it was on a desert, you were totally desolated and there was nothing there. And it was actually quite depressing. So she gave up with the desert. She gave up with the desert plan. However, the point I want to make is here that sometimes we just don't know. She wrote to the 100 richest people in Poland, and somebody gave her the money to come and stay in the UK. You don't know. But if you don't try things, you'll never find out.
Mm-hmm. Be bold, swing for the fences, do your best.
Yeah, it's okay. We have to learn to pick ourselves up.
Well, if you were to prescribe, what routines or habits would you encourage someone to develop as they move along their coaching journey?
I'm trying to think of an answer because with my NLP hat on, I'm very into daily routines because I have a series of daily routines, which is I do some exercises first thing in the morning. I do a little bit of meditation. At night, I'll do Marshall's daily questions and some other things. There's some other things in there. Daily routines, in my view, are incredibly important because we are creating order in a disordered world. One of the things that seems to make people happy, resilient, and all that sort of stuff, as I say, is good relationships. Another two are having some certainty of what's going on. And what's the right word? Yeah, is having some certainty of what's going on. And a way of having certainty is if you create some very simple routines during the day, you actually know what's happening. So you've got a bedrock of certainty. You built routines which are a bedrock of certainty, and then when you do things and they don't go as expected, you're okay because if one or two things don't go expected, but your life is still, you can still predict the next day you're going to have your routine. I don't know if I'm explaining this at all well, but my view is establishing basic routines gives us a sense of certainty in our lives, which means we can cope much better with uncertainty.
Okay. So find your footing and you'll know when things are not as they're supposed to be.
Yeah. But if you do develop routines, because actually doing a bit of exercise, doing a bit of meditation, doing daily questions, setting some goals at the beginning of the day, maybe even doing some affirmations at the beginning of the day. Nothing too heavy, but a little bit of basic routines makes everything much easier, in my view.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I would agree. I mean, I would say exercise as an entrepreneur is one of the few things that keeps me sane. And I can literally feel my brain and body changing if I miss,
Yes.
3
No,
days
absolutely
in,
right.
if missing it, my wife
Absolutely
will
right.
say,
Absolutely.
something's wrong. Like, go spend some
Yeah.
time in the garage, go to the gym, go do something, go for a run. But yeah, that's pretty key. And then daily questions. Let me ask, is there a question or two that you would recommend people have on their daily questions list if they're starting out as a coach?
Oh, I'm trying to remember what mine are. I do have something. Have I done my best to add value to my clients? Is something that's simple there. I mean, have I done my best to do my exercise routine? Please do not forget, have I done my best to have some fun during the day?
Oh, Michael, I would fail that one 6 out of 7 times, probably.
Yeah, well, we all do, but it's a bit silly. We have a life,
Yeah.
It's that there is an idea that the brain tends to sink to the negative unless we do something to keep it positive. That's why gratitude. What are 3 things I'm gratitude? What are 3 things? Whatever the right word is, I have gratitude today is really useful because it fixes our mind on the positive, where our mind can sink to the negative. And so, forgetting to have fun is something that it's very easy to do, especially if we're under work. We're under pressure. We've got a mortgage, all that sort of stuff. So we need to have some time. I'm saying the obvious. I apologize for this, but we need to have some time where we can enjoy ourselves. I shouldn't have to say it. I shouldn't have to say it, but I have to say it to myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask, if I'm a client, or if I'm a leader, one of the challenges that faces coaching as an industry is there's such radical differentiation between not just theoretical or intellectual leading groups, but also the individuals that practice their methodologies, such that leaders can have a pretty difficult time understanding what is what, who is who. If I'm one of those leaders and I say, coaching, I think could be right for me, but I'm just not sure where to start, where would you point them?
Sorry, I couldn't resist saying I'd give you 3 sessions.
Oh, that's perfect. No, that's an invitation.
And we'll work out what you really want, and then we'll work out whether I can help you get there. Does the rest matter? Does all the different? I know everybody's bought into different, different certificates and all that sort of thing, but in the end, as a leader, my view is some people actually need the certification and all that sort of stuff, but many people, if somebody can genuinely help them get their outcome, if somebody can genuinely help them get their outcome a little bit faster, with a little bit more pleasure, with a little bit less pain, and can help them on their journey so they can chat to them, it sounds like a slam dunk to me.
And you can, of course, point people in the right direction if you decide that it's not something that you can, like you mentioned with your friend earlier.
No, absolutely.
Okay, good.
We need coaches. Sorry, just to end, we need coaches. Oh, you may call them something else, but actually, humans as an individual, we have blind spots, we have egos, we have cognitive dissonance. To have somebody that we can honestly share stuff with and bounce stuff off is something that will help all our performances, I think.
Absolutely. Well, last question I want to tee up before we close is that in Stakeholder Centered Coaching, we give our clients a list of do's and don'ts for their behaviors as leaders. So if I'm a coach, what do's and don'ts might you prescribe for coaches who are trying to find their footing in the industry? So think about that question. We're going to wrap up and we'll conclude with that question. So we are nearing the end of our time. I want to invite all of you who are watching at home or who are listening on your drive to join our conversation. If there is a question you'd like to ask, a coach you'd like to hear interview, or a topic you'd like to hear explored, drop us a line at podcast@mgscc.net. And if you're interested in learning more about the Stakeholder-Centered Coaching Program, go to mgscc.net/sample course, mgscc.net/sample course to get instant access to the course Foundations of Stakeholder-Centered Coaching, where you can learn the founding principles of our coaching methodology at no cost to you. So, Michael, do's and don'ts. What would you prescribe?
I would say I'm using the wrong words, but love yourself more, like yourself more, be gentle with yourself. Be almost treat yourself as one of your clients. You're nice to your clients, you work hard for your clients. Almost think about yourself in the same way. So almost we can coach ourselves. And I know it may sound a bit strange, but the first one is, as I say, be okay, be like ourselves, all that sort of stuff. And there is actually there's some very interesting stuff around. If we can be coached by our future selves, we should imagine what our future self, what we would like our future selves to be, and almost check in with our future self, who has all the knowledge, who's gone through all the pains and has finally succeeded. Asking our future self what we would do in that situation is surprisingly useful. So develop a good relationship with your future self. I know it sounds a bit weird, but it is very effective.
Well, Michael, it has been wonderful to have you. Before we say goodbye to our listeners, tell us one more time, how can people follow your story, follow you, or get in touch with you?
If you go to nlp-techniques.org or nlp-training.org, you can contact me. I am reasonably easy to contact.
I like that. Thank you, Michael. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being a part of this. You can find Michael also on LinkedIn. This show was produced by Stakeholder-Centered Coaching, where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. Join us next week for another episode of Conversations with Coaches.